Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Sanctuary. We are back. We are going to do some Dynasty sells, some overvalued veterans. I'm joined by a phenomenal guest today. You may know him as Wyatt. You may know him as @WyattB_FF on Twitter. He is a co-owner at JWB Fantasy Football. He is a contributor over at DLF. And of course, he is an expert ranker for Fantasy Pros. Wyatt, thank you very much for coming in, Sanctuary. How you doing?
Doing great. I really appreciate you having me on. But I'll be honest, the task here today was a little bit of a tough one for me because I am someone who tends to lean towards being into veterans more than I would say the average Dynasty player. Because I definitely have the mindset of like I'm trying to win in every league I'm in unless like it's a disaster and I know that I need to rebuild. I'm just one of those people who's always trying to push to win in Dynasty. I play in like a 2-year window max normally. So like picking the veterans that I wanted to sell was actually kind of tough.
Well, that was the whole premise of the show. Was we talked? I can't even remember. We initially talked 3-4 months ago about you coming on and sort of talked about whether we got you on to do some prospects. And you said, actually, I'd rather talk about some vets. And I thought, well, let's try and make you be negative. Let's try and make you a bit grumpy and talk about some guys that are overvalued that you should probably be selling right now. And yeah, it's always fun when you get to be a bit horrible and a bit. I feel like
honestly, it's more fun.
Yeah, because everyone can sit here and say, go and buy this person, but actually being able to have a strong take and a strong opinion and say, right, let's go and sell this person is quite tough sometimes. So yeah, we'll dive straight in. I feel like it's the man of the moment. I feel like you've timed this well in terms of your first pick of someone that's overvalued. Yeah. We're talking about Alexander Mattison. If you didn't realize, I mean, what takes away? Why do you think that he's a sell right now?
Yeah, it was really funny that like when you asked me to do this and I picked Alexander first, it was like the first one that came to my head. And then right before the show, Dalvin Cook obviously gets released. But so I think Alexander Mattison is mostly an average running back, maybe a little bit above average everywhere, which is good. NFL teams like that. And that's why we've seen whenever Dalvin Cook goes down, Alexander Mattison take over the backfield and just have all of the opportunities. And that's like I think the unfaithful thing that's been happening a lot recently is just citing these the splits basically of when Alexander Mattison starts games. I mean, and it is impressive. 24 opportunities a game, over 100 total yards, almost a touchdown a game, almost 20 PPR points per game in the games he started. But that's over 4 seasons. It's 6 games, and he's never started more than 1 game in a row. He's never started 2 games in a row in all this time. So like, I keep thinking, why do we have so much faith that just because Dalvin Cook is gone, that Alexander Mattison is all of a sudden going to continue? That we're in an extrapolation season now with Alexander Mattison. Like we've played this game so many times with other running backs. They do really good limited time. Let's see what happens when they have more opportunities, and more often than not, they do not meet the expectations that are given to them. Now, like I said, I think Alexander Mattison's an above average running back everywhere. Like I think he's going to be good, this season. But I'm seeing trades of him going away and people are giving firsts for him. Okay. I've seen more than a first for him. And I will take any first for Alexander Mattison. I think it's just proper process. This is someone going into his 5th NFL season on his 2nd contract, right? He's starting to get up there in age because of that. Now, Adam Harstead has done some research that, age cliff is kind of wrong because good players stay good for longer because they're good, right? But a player like Alexander Mattison, I would not qualify in that section of players that continue to do really well late into their years. At least not yet. I wouldn't qualify him as that. So, yeah, 24, 25, even 26. If someone offered me a 26 first for Alexander Mattison on my roster, I would take it just because I think it's a good process to take the first for Alexander Mattison. I think if you're relying on Alexander Mattison at this point, maybe your team isn't as competitive as you think it is. So I just tread lightly with Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you've said there. I think for me, he's a screaming sell, a screaming overvalued. I mean, there's been some weird valuations flying around. Obviously, the big one that I think has been doing the rounds for the last 2 days is straight up for Tony Pollard. I take Tony Pollard every day of the week over Alexander Mattison. I think I would happily, you've got my trade value there on the screen. I'd happily take a second plus for Alexander Mattison right now. I think the thing that I think you talked about it in terms of that extrapolation season and taking, a small sample size and saying, but if he gets across the whole entire season, he's going to be great. What people seem to forget, I think, with backup running backs when there's an injury to the lead back is that NFL teams go into a season with saying, right, this is our kind of lead back. For the Vikings, it's been Dalvin Cook. Alexander Mattison is our backup. Okay. If Dalvin Cook gets injured, they're not thinking, right, Alexander Mattison's now our lead back and our RB3 is going to be our backup. They're thinking, our RB3 is probably more of a special teamer or something like that. Let's just give everything to Alexander Mattison. Okay.
Yeah.
The Vikings aren't going to be giving Mattison 24 opportunities a game. I can pretty much guarantee that now. Okay. Yeah, that's what he's done in a 6-game sample size. But I think there's going to be McBride get touches. I think Chandler's going to get touches. I mean, Kenny Nwangu's more of a special teamer, but there's a chance he might get some opportunities. And I just think that anybody who's valuing Alexander Mattison at a first is, to me, got poor process and poor kind of logic in terms of he's probably a 1-year option, maybe 2. Now, I know that he's just signed a new contract, and I've seen a few people going, the Vikings have paid him. It's a 2-year, $7 million deal. Like,
yeah.
That's not a lot of money. James Conner got more than that in 1 year. Like, this is backup money. They can save $600,000 by moving on from him next year. Like, it's not massive money to go and throw a running back that, to me, I think it screams Alexander Mattison is probably one piece of the puzzle, and he's probably going to end up as a solid RB2 at the end of the year. And it's like, fine, and then for a second, I'd happily pay that, but I don't think he's got any upside. I don't think he's got any future value, because I think, we've got that end of contract come in. As you said, the age is creeping up. So, yeah, if I can get any first, if I can take a second plus, I'd happily take that right now, because I think that you're never going to get a better time to sell right now. And I think for any running back, if you can sell at peak value, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that doesn't even get into like the offense, where they have become very pass heavy. They pass to the running backs at a lower percentage than they have in the past now. Like, this might just be signaled that the Vikings are saying, like, we're going to pass a lot, even more than last year. And they were also in like a lot of close games last year, and they still had like a high pass percentage. So when they're playing in a tougher division now, I mean, they were obviously like a fraudulent team last year with their record. If they're playing from behind, like, how much are they passing? Is Alexander Mattison a part of that? Like, how much of a part of it is he? These are the questions you have to ask. And as you mentioned, like, yeah, he's probably like a solid RB2 this year, but what does that mean when after that's done? Is he going to rise up in value much? I doubt it, because of his age. I mean, maybe you're just okay with like Alexander Mattison dying on your roster at that point, and like as a low end RB2 for maybe next year too, like the year after.
And RB2 production is replaceable. Like, you can go and find RB2 production week in, week out, basically off the waiver wire. Like, it's not difficult to kind of cobble together 10 to 15 running back points. What you want is running back ones. Like, I don't want to have any capital or anything invested in a guy that I'm saying he's probably an RB2, because it's just bad investment, basically. So we're gonna leave Alexander Mattison behind. We're gonna move forward to another running back that I've seen an awful lot of hype about, but I just can't get on board. It's Rachaad White. For me, like the player, don't think he's ever going to be an every down back. I think he's going to be possibly on one of the worst offenses in the league. Would we be shocked if the Bucs fell apart this year? Would we be shocked if they became sellers at the trade deadline? That Mike Evans contract could be really appealing for a contender. Maybe Chris Godwin could move. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bucs go into some sort of rebuild through this season. And do I really want a running back that I'm saying isn't going to get high value touches, because I don't think he's going to get goal line opportunities? I think he's going to potentially lose some of the early down work because of his size profile. And I'm having to pay mid RB2 prices to go and get him. I very much the same as Alexander Mattison. I don't think he's got the ceiling. I don't think he's got that every down workload. I don't think he's on a good enough offense to be a fantasy star. So I'm happy selling, and it feels like the hype's only going to get more as people see some clips of him catching passes in the preseason and things. Are you a believer in Rachaad White, Wyatt?
I want to be, because I really liked him during prospect season when he was coming out, coming into the NFL. But all the points you make are correct. Like there's worry about heavy worry about the offense, obviously, right? Like it could be just disastrously bad. And his profile, like you mentioned, he is a little bit of an awkward profile where he's like tall for a running back, so his BMI is a little bit low. So like you said, he's not really a big running back, even though he's kind of big in general for running back. He's like more slender. He also runs kind of upright, so which I think leads to bigger hits on his body. But I think with Rachaad White, like if you're playing in multiple leagues, I think you want to keep some exposure to White if you have him, in the off chance that like, well, one, the offense is just like competent, or two, that he does get just like the full 3-down workload, because he is the type of running back, because there was some hype behind him. He's day 2 draft capital, that if he does have that role and he's like producing some, that you could sell later for more, like in season, right? Even if you don't really believe. But yeah, like it's just tough, because like I said, I really like the player, but I just hate everything that's happened with him since. He was really inefficient as a rookie. A lot of that can be blamed on the offensive line. I think they've starting to get healthy, trying to add to it, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be more efficient. The offensive line could still be bad. He could just end up being bad. Like the inefficiency just could be on his shoulders. But I think if you are going to move him, like I think it's weird looking in the same range that he is in, because you're probably sacrificing some production if you're moving off of him. Maybe you have a team that you're fine with that you don't really mind. But I think like if you can try and tier down, there's not as many options. But like Antonio Gibson is someone who I think like could possibly approach the same type of production as Rachaad White this year. He hopefully has that full receiving role for the Commanders, and he also has the contingent upside. I think happens to Brian Robinson. He could like take over the backfield. But tiering up, like I wonder how much, because this deal, like the DLF ADP, RB18, that's pretty high, right? Like how much does it take to tier up from him to like J.K. Dobbins, Nick Chubb, Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard? Like how much does that take? Is it a second to get one of those? Because I'll do that like in a second.
Yeah, I think it depends on the league, but probably a second. I think that's about right. I think for me, the move that, you talked at the beginning about being win now and kind of going all in. I wonder if the move is to pivot from Rachaad White to a more win now option. Do you go? Can you go and get Aaron Jones? Can you go and get potentially Joe Mixon as a 1-year flyer? Can you go and you can probably get James Conner plus. Like,
oh yeah, I like that one too.
And I think that they're going to be in similar range of outcomes. I think Joe Mixon's got potential to be a back end RB1. I think Aaron Jones is going to be in that same conversation. I think James Conner is probably going to have a similar season to Rachaad White, but because he's 4 or 5 years older, however it is, and the fact that everybody's age obsessed in Dynasty, people are going to chase the youth of Rachaad White, so you can get that added asset. Could you maybe get James Conner in a second? I don't know if you could, but I'd certainly be asking the question.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile ask.
Yeah, and I think that it's just, for me, any running back that I don't see as going to be a superstar, I think this is going to be his peak value. So this is the point at which I'm looking to sell. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, me. I'm grumpy. I don't like running backs. So we'll leave them behind. If you're watching, if you've not hit the thumbs up, please do so now. It really helps us. But also make sure you're subscribing. We've got so much more content coming. Tom is kicking off best ball season. He's got some live drafts with some incredible guests, and I've got plenty more lined up for the coming weeks and months. So we're going to go across to one of your picks now. DJ Moore feels like he's kind of always been the nearly man. Everybody talks about him as the darling, but never quite kind of got there in that elite production. Are you going to really hate on him now?
It hurts me because like I love DJ Moore. He's an amazing player. Like everybody loves DJ Moore, right? Like there's no people out there who like dislike him as a player, because everyone realizes how talented he is. It's just he's always been in this rough situation. He's never had more than 12.5 PPR points per game in his career, despite all this talent, right? Because of the situation around him, always playing with terrible QBs. And I would say he's probably playing with the best QB of his career. I'm a Justin Fields fan. I think that Justin Fields can be a good passer in the NFL, but we have to recognize he is not there yet. There are some encouraging things for Justin Fields as a passer, but we have to recognize he's not there yet. And then you look at the Bears' offense last year, 377 pass attempts. The next closest were the Falcons with 415, lowest in the league, right? 2,219 passing yards last year. The next closest were the Falcons, of course, with almost 2,700 yards. So you expect them to pass more than that, right? But how much? How much do they regress back to the mean in those passing attempts and pass rate? I don't know, because Justin Fields is someone who takes a lot of sacks, runs the ball a lot. It's just like DJ Moore could come in, have a 30% target share, and struggle to be a wide receiver too. Like, that's a real possibility in the Bears offense. And he's now been in the league long enough where, like, we have to start thinking, is the value going to start to decline at some point? Because has held strong in his dynasty value. Like, still looking, wide receiver 21, wide receiver 22 in these two different marketplaces. I hate to say it, but, like, I think it's time to move on from DJ Moore. I prefer, like, tiering up and down with him, preferably down, honestly. Like, down to Marquise Brown in a plus sounds pretty good. Brandon Ayuk in a plus, like, can you do that? Jahan Dotson in a plus, maybe even like Amari Cooper, and you can get a good plus on that. And Amari Cooper is just outproducing it. Like, these are players who are likely to outproduce it this year.
Yeah, no, I like it. I think that, the pass attempts thing, I know it's been beaten into the ground. I feel like everybody talks about it, but I don't think it gets understood enough. If the Bears had 150% more pass attempts this year than they did last year, they'd still have finished 18th last year in pass attempts per game. 150% more pass attempts, and they'd still be below average. Like, that's yes, they're going to pass more, but it doesn't matter. There's still going to be a low pass volume offense. I think that for me, DJ Moore is the heir apparent to what I used to describe Terry McLaurin as, in that DJ Moore is an incredibly talented wide receiver. I think he is a, potentially elite NFL wide receiver, and people from a dynasty perspective overvalue him because they see that talent, but he never quite put the production on the field. Terry McLaurin's been held up as a fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 for the last 4 or 5 years, but has only ever put up back end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 fantasy numbers consistently. And that's basically where DJ Moore is. And I think that the move isn't necessarily a good thing for him, because I agree with you. I really like Justin Fields, but that offense has now got, it's not a great receiving core, but it's got DJ Moore. It's got Chase Claypool, who they've spent the 32nd pick on. It's got Velus Jones that they spent a 3rd round pick on last year. It's got Darnell Mooney, who's in a, contract year. They've then got Tyler Scott, who they spent a 4th round pick in this year. There's mouths to feed, and that's before I've even got Cole Kmet, the 3 running backs. Like, I don't think DJ Moore's gonna be in a position where he's commanding like a 30% target share, and that's the number he's gonna have to probably hit, given this is going to be a low passing offense, for him to put up the production to pay off those wide receiver 2 prices. As you said, he's not getting younger. The age is starting to creep up, and unless he puts up a top probably 15 season this year, that value is going to decline, because people are going to realize, okay, now he's getting to the point and that age is starting to hit. So I think that, I feel like I've said this for every player, but now might be the time to sell at peak value, and you can get out of DJ Moore. I love the talk of, the guys that you mentioned. I loved the Amari Cooper one. I think that he's potentially due for a bounce back. I wonder if you can go and get, maybe it's the wrong time, but Calvin Ridley. I think people are starting to realize, oh yeah, Calvin Ridley's really good. Maybe Deontay Johnson. I think he's primed for a breakout. I talked about in the last episode significantly with Hannah. I think he could be a sneaky kind of pivot from somebody like DJ Moore. So yeah, some interesting options there, and I think I kind of agree with you, quite frankly.
You hit on something that's really good there for me. That like maybe like if he has a top 15, almost like fringe wide receiver one season, maybe he goes up in value, right? But like that means there are so many other outcomes where he only drops.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
Yeah, and we're in a game of, you know, playing on those outcomes and taking, for me, the most likely scenario, and the most likely scenario is he's heading down, which to me says you got to get out now. So the next guy, I feel like he's been my punching bag all off season, so I'm going to continue to punch away and kind of hate on him. Jared Goff, okay, the Lions were everybody's second team. They were the dream story last year. Ben Johnson's a fantastic offensive coordinator. Jared Goff is the second coming, and apparently he's going to be a superstar. But I just don't see it. I think that, he's being held up as quarterback 19. That's a guy that you're basically saying in Superflex drafts, this is a guy that I'm comfortable building around as my QB2. I'm not fully convinced that he's the starting quarterback next year for the Lions, let alone in 2025. His contract expires after the 2024 season. For him to still be a starting quarterback in the NFL, they're going to have to pay him. And I just can't see a world where the Lions are saying, you know what, we're going to pay Jared Goff 30 million a year, 35, 40 million a year to be our franchise quarterback. I think it's a different thing when you've basically got given him for free from the Rams. You potentially got extra draft capital to take on that contract. And I think that if the Lions are serious about becoming a true contender, they're going to need to go and find an answer at quarterback. And I just don't believe Jared Goff is that. So, yeah, I feel like I'm a bit of a hater. I feel like I've talked about it a lot, but I would happily go and pivot to any of what I'm considering the kind of safer older quarterbacks, whether that's Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Derek Carr. Hell, I'd even take a year or two of Aaron Rodgers or Matt Stafford over Jared Goff. I just don't think he's got that elite ceiling. I'm concerned he's not got the longevity, and I just think that it feels like he's being held up, but I'm not quite sure what's holding up his dynasty value. Are you a Goff stan, Wyatt, or are you not?
I'm not. I'm like sell a little bit. I think he's more of a sell than anything because he's being ranked ahead of people like Geno Smith, who I'd much rather have, Russell Wilson, who could have a bounce back year, players like that, where they have just like a higher ceiling, I think. I mean, we actually just saw it with Geno Smith. Like, he legitimately has a higher ceiling than Jared Goff. I mean, last year, I think everybody would agree that Jared Goff had a very good year for Jared Goff. And he was 17.1 points per game. It's just, I mean, it's fine. It's good. Like, it's fine. You would happy having that in your QB2 in a lot of cases. But like, you're hoping for that again, and we're not sure we're going to get that again because he had a really good season for himself. It was his highest points per game since 2018. And as you mentioned, I don't know how long he stays their starting QB. There's been plenty of talk about them trying to find a QB to replace him at some point, whether that's just people outside the organization talking about it or not. Like, it makes sense. There's reason for that talk to happen. They drafted Hendon Hooker. What you think about Hendon Hooker, varies person to person. I think that he is a player that played in a gimmicky offense, but the NFL saw a lot of traits in him, and NFL teams like traits with their quarterbacks, right? I'm not saying Hendon Hooker's going to take Jared Goff's job, but my point is that I think there is credence to the Lions may be moving on from Jared Goff, possibly as soon as next year. I don't think it should be a surprise if that happens. So it's not someone I really want to be investing in. Like, in my rankings, I don't have him that far behind these rankings, but that's mostly because like it gets real bad after that,
Yeah.
In QB wise. So it's almost by default that he's like in my low 20s in my QB rankings. But as you mentioned, there are quarterbacks around him that I would just much rather have if I'm looking for a QB2 to help me win.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, if you look at redraft ADP, okay, Geno Smith's ahead of him, Aaron Rodgers is ahead of him, Russell Wilson's ahead of him, okay? Those are three guys that we're saying we prefer, the industry saying we prefer those three players to Jared Goff for 2023, okay? But Jared Goff doesn't have any better longevity than any of those guys. Okay, Geno Smith's on a contract that could be moved on at the end of this year. Well, guess what? So's Jared Goff. Aaron Rodgers could retire, could be moved on from the Jets at the end of this year. Well, so could Jared Goff. Like, Russell Wilson could be the same. Like, I don't get what you're saying as to have Jared Goff ahead of those three guys, because we're saying we prefer them in redraft to Jared Goff, but in Dynasty we prefer Jared Goff because he's younger. But he's younger, but doesn't have the security or the contract or the situation that means he's going to be playing longer. So for me, I feel like I've been banging my head against a brick wall all off season, because I just don't see it with Jared Goff. Okay, he had this dream season where he finished as QB10, but as you said, his actual per game production wasn't great. I just think that there was a lot of quarterbacks that didn't play a full 17 games, and it meant that, if you played a whole season, you were slightly buoyed in terms of where you finished in that end of season ranking as such.
Yeah, I love you bringing up the 2023 season ADP too, like that, because I mean, like, place like Underdog, drafts have been going all off season, and people want to say like, well, what's that have to do with Dynasty, right? But these are some of the sharpest players drafting these drafts now with money on the line for the 2023 season, and Jared Goff is behind these QBs. Okay, like, that matters. That is the industry, the marketplace telling you that's what we think of these QBs for this next season. And we don't want to look too far ahead, especially with QBs like this, as you mentioned, that it's a shorter window because we don't know their future after even possibly this year.
Yeah, exactly that. We'll bring you on to another guy I've never understood, another guy that I feel like has been hyped up constantly. It's Irv Smith. I don't get his dynasty value. I don't get his redraft. I see that he's going in the top. I think he's tight end 17 in ADP at the moment in redraft. Talk to me about Irv Smith.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is it overly hyped. Nothing was ever really there. Basically, I think it's because he played at Alabama and ran a fast 40 time. But he's actually not even that athletic. He like only has the kind of good 40 time for his weight. He's also 6'2", 240, which is like a section of tight ends that like just doesn't really exist for fantasy success. I know that like that is a little bit arbitrary. Like, it's not something we really have to pay attention to too much, like that type of thing. But it's true. Just like look up tight ends who are 6'2", 240. Like, it just don't exist in fantasy success. But anyways, back to some like real stuff. He's been unproductive outside of 4 games to end the 2020 season. Then he missed the entire 2021 season with a torn MCL. He missed half of 2022 with a high ankle sprain. The Vikings just let him walk and would rather sign Josh Oliver to their team. And he signs with the Bengals, and then the hype train starts to come, right? Because now he's Joe Burrow's tight end. But I mean, look at what Hayden Hurst did last year. It wasn't that good. And I think it's very fair to say that Hayden Hurst is a better player than Irv Smith. And bringing back up Underdog, and as you mentioned, like, his ADP is climbing right now on Underdog, which is wild. Like, I don't get it. I don't see how he's going to have that much actual production in that offense. We know that it does not run through the tight end at all. He's like at best the 5th option on a weekly basis in the passing offense. So yeah, like it says here on the screen, trade value is a 3rd. Sure, absolutely. I will re-roll Irv Smith for a 3rd. But like, honestly, like, the thing that I would be trying to do is try and trade him for like, I don't know, Cade Otton and anything on top, just like a draft pick, whatever, like just something like that. Jelani Woods is another one. Like, sure, yeah, I'm into that. Isaiah Likely, even. Just any of these like young tight ends who like you can make a case for some potential, especially like Cade Otton. Like, I think no one's really talking about like Cade Otton is the starting tight end for the Buccaneers, but no one wants
decent profile, decent draft capital,
Yep.
decent landing spot, gonna have a role. Yeah, nobody talks about him.
Yeah. And like as we mentioned earlier in the show, like that offense is probably going to be dreadful. But if you're just like the third option on that team, like this isn't about K. Dotton, but he's a good target, I think, for if you're going to move down from Irv Smith, because I don't think you're tearing up with Irv Smith. I think that's like an impossibility in your leagues. I'd be very surprised if someone's willing to tear down to Irv Smith. So I think you have to move backwards in the rankings with it, and those are some of the players I like.
Yeah, no, I like it. I've got a quiz question for you here, Wyatt. So Irv Smith, through his 4-year NFL career, how many times do you think he finished as a top 10 tight end on a week?
It has to be in that 4-game stretch to end 2020. And I think, if I remember correctly, he scored in 2 games. So I'm going to say 2.
So it's a little better than that. It's 4. So he did it 3 times in 2020.
Okay.
And then once last year where he was the tight end 4. I think week 2, week 2, where he caught 5 balls and a touchdown. I mean, but let's be honest, like anyone can finish as a top 10 tight end. You basically just need a couple of catches and a touchdown, and that's a top 10 performance. And we're saying he's done it 4 times through 4 seasons.
It's embarrassing.
And now he's going to be on an offense where he's going to sit behind Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon in target share. It's like I just don't see it. And I think that the Bengals are kind of becoming this sort of escalator of average tight ends, that they bring somebody in, they have an okay year, and they spit them out. But that doesn't mean I particularly want him for fantasy, because given the fact he's going to be 5th option on the Bengals, he could. I wouldn't be shocked if Irv Smith. Well, actually, I would be shocked if he stayed healthy all year. But if Irv Smith stayed healthy all year, I wouldn't be shocked if he was a top 12 tight end. Okay, but that top 12 tight end production isn't going to come in, 8 to 10 points every single week. It's going to be 0, 0, or he might have got you 2 catches for 20 yards, and then he'll get you 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. So it's like, oh, great, you could start him that week, but chances are, because he did nothing in the last 3, he sat on your bench. Like, fine. If you want to go and take a flyer on him in best ball because of the offense he's in, there's going to be some opportunities, if he can stay on the field, that he will see targets, he will see red zone receptions. But I certainly have no idea when they're going to come, because he's going to be 4th, 5th option, and he's going to basically have to feed off scraps. So I don't think you're ever going to feel comfortable to plug him into a starting lineup. So I agree with you. I love the idea of going and getting, one of those young flyer types that you can go and get. I'd love to go and get someone like Daniel Bellinger, because I think that everybody's hyping up Darren Waller. Daniel Bellinger showed out last year when he was on the field. I'm not convinced Darren Waller is going to stay healthy is the answer.
And for how long?
Exactly. Maybe you can get, Bellinger plus. Maybe you can get K. Dotton and Bellinger. I like the idea of getting off him, because I think he's the perfect preseason hype man, isn't it? It feels like it happens every year, and he's never delivered on the hype.
Yeah, I have a hard time envisioning a world in which you are just starting Irv Smith every week. So if we're saying like it's hard to envision him having a real ceiling of any kind at this point. So what's he doing on your roster? Like at tight end, I basically just want 2 types of players. The ones I know I can just play every week and feel comfortable about it, and these flyers who have possible potential. And I don't think Irv Smith is either of those.
No, I think that's a great point. He's a roster clogger, let's be honest. He's exactly that. Perfect. Well, that brings us to the end, Wyatt. So thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been an absolute delight chatting through with you. Remind the people listening, where can they find you? Where can they see your work?
I appreciate you having me. This was a lot of fun. It is way fun to talk down about some players occasionally. You can find me on Twitter at WyattB_FF. You can basically find all of my content at jwbfantasyfootball.com. As you mentioned, though, I do some writing for DLF, and during the season, all year round, you can find my rankings, on Fantasy Pros. And yeah, it's if you're watching this right now on the channel and you're not subscribed, you should absolutely be doing that right now, because Rich and Tom are great and I enjoy their content, and they're good people. So you should be subscribed.
I greatly appreciate that, bud. And yeah, likewise, if you're not subscribed to the JWB guys, they're doing some fantastic stuff over there. So make sure you give them a subscribe as well. We'll be back very soon with more content coming your way, but rest up, take care, and we'll speak easy.